What do you do when life throws you a curveball? In today's episode of the Impact Unlimited podcast, I'm interviewing Stacey Copas, who went through a tragic accident at the age of 12 years old that changed the entire course of her life. We talk through the journey she went on after the accident, how she overcame it, and how she's turned it around to be something that's caused her to live her best life possible. I'm hoping it encourages you, and I know it will inspire you to be more resilient in the business that you're building. It's going to be a great episode. Stay tuned. Hey, what's up, and welcome to another episode of the Impact Unlimited podcast. This is the show where I sit down and interview industry-leading experts with an aim to equip you with both the skill sets and the mindsets to become an impactful entrepreneur. So if you want to become a better leader, build bigger businesses, get more done in less time, and create an impact in the world, then look no further and let's get started. Well, hey guys, and welcome to the show today. It's my honor and privilege to have my friend here, Stacey, all the way from Australia on the show today. Welcome to the show today, Stacey.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Ben. And yes, I can let you know that the future has arrived here in Sydney.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it's morning here, evening there. So hopefully it's a bit warmer where you are than where we are. But I used to live in Australia, so I love it there. And you live in Sydney, right?
I do. And, I'm completely biased, but definitely the best place in the world to live and definitely the best place in the world to be stuck at home as well.
Yeah, definitely. I miss my garden in Sydney, being able to sit out in the sun and actually be warm. So definitely got it good there. So Stacey, I love to introduce our guests to the show, to the audience, with a couple of little icebreaker questions, if you are up for that. So my first one that I'm going to ask you today is do you have a favorite quote?
My favourite quote would have to be a Gandhi quote, and it is, "Strength does not come from physical strength, it comes from an indomitable will." And that's one that I have lived and breathed for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that quote. Yeah, and we'll get into what that's meant to you, I'm sure, in a moment. That's a brilliant quote. And then finally, this is one I love to ask people because it just intrigues me so much. If you could time travel forwards or backwards to any period of time, where would you go and why?
There's 2 points I would go to, and they're both music related.
Okay.
So I would love to go back to the early 90s and be around in the Seattle scene. A huge music fan, a huge grunge fan, and I think that would have been amazing to sort of see some of those bands in the pubs in Seattle before they really broke. So that would have been cool. And then another music one, I would have loved to have sort of gone back to the sort of late 60s, early 70s to see Hendrix and the Doors and early Led Zeppelin, all that sort of stuff. So, Woodstock, that type of thing. So, yeah, definitely they would be my periods in time. I'm not really interested in travelling forward. I like to believe that we're sort of creating that as we go, and I think we've learned enough lessons from Back to the Future too anyway, haven't we, to not want to travel forward.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, that's so good. I love that idea about, especially in music, the bands that we now know and love that are massive, seeing them before they got massive. That's such a great thought. Yeah, man, that's fascinating. Anyway, that's amazing. Thank you for answering those questions. So we'd love to sort of hear some more about you, Stacey, what you do, and a bit about your background and where you've got to today, and what you're going to talk to us about on the show today.
Yeah, so I am the founder of the Academy of Resilience today and the author of How to Be Resilient. But I'm not an academic or a psychologist, and that was something that when I first ventured into this world of resilience, I felt that I wasn't qualified to speak about resilience because of those two things.
Yeah.
But thankfully, a lot of my clients, once I've started to say, just letting you know, I'm not an academic or a psychologist, a lot of the CEOs said, thank God for that. We've dealt with the org psychs, and it was interesting, but it wasn't really practical or relatable. So I come to resilience from a perspective of life experience, and what I've done is created a framework of resilience by reverse engineering my life from back at 12 years old. I actually broke my neck and drowned in a relative's backyard swimming pool.
Wow.
And it left me quadriplegic and needing a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And this year's actually the 30th anniversary of when that happened.
Wow.
And so back then, I literally felt like my life was over. I was in a good place in my life. I was 12 years old. And yeah, so I thought that life was over, and I went through, really, really dark times in my teens. And, much like a lot of teens sought some pretty destructive habits to cope with how I was feeling about life, which, I really hated life and I hated myself. And I spent a great deal of those years drunk and stoned, seeking those moments of happiness. But that sort of led me, deeper and darker into the sort of pits. And what I sort of realised now is that, back at the time, physically I'd drowned once when I had my accident, but I was actually emotionally drowning every single day at that point in time.
Wow.
So it was definitely a really, really challenging time in my life. And as I sort of got, later into my teens, into my early 20s, I'd left all of those destructive habits behind and really started to shift my perspective on what had happened. And I was able to shift and go, I'm actually grateful for what had happened. And most people go, how the hell, how the hell can ending up a quadriplegic and needing a wheelchair for the rest of your life be positive? But when people spend time with me, they realise that I really am. And I can say with absolute certainty, I've had the most amazing experiences, adventures, people come into my life that it wouldn't have happened had my life taken, a different path. So I am grateful, and that shifted everything. And so that really opened up my world and enabled me to then go on and say yes to opportunities, have amazing experiences, and then be able to get into my 30s and have mentors say to me, you need to share your story, and help me to then reverse engineer what did I actually do consciously and unconsciously, which now I'm able to share with others so that they can apply that, not just for people that have gone through, personal adversity as far as, physical or health challenges, but mainly I work with, leaders in business, entrepreneurs, and, people that are dealing with challenges in business and also juggling the challenges of life combined with their businesses too.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, obviously amazing story, by the way. It's, so much we can dig into there, and hopefully we will over this interview. But I think that topic of resilience is an interesting one. I think it's a really powerful one, of course. But I think you obviously, from your history and what you've been through, there could have been a number of ways you could have gone with it. But this idea of resilience, I think it speaks to so many people, because regardless of the type of challenge or whether we try and compare the level of challenge that we face, we all face challenges, and there is a certain sense of resilience that's required for entrepreneurs, right, to overcome those and keep pushing forward. So I'd love to really explore that more with you, because it's clear from your story and talking to you that that's exactly what you've gone through. And as you mentioned, you're now sort of doing a lot to help other people. You're like a keynote speaker now, right? You're speaking on stage, helping people all over the world, and I love that you've turned what has been an incredible challenge into an opportunity to impact people's lives. And so from the outset, it's just incredibly inspiring. For people that are listening and are potentially facing different challenges themselves, what would you say to them in terms of how to begin that process of being resilient? Because I know at times in my life I've faced challenges and I haven't felt overly resilient, and there's things we have to go through to grow that, right? What would be some advice you could give to people to help them become more resilient?
I think that the thing that I would like people to look at as far as resilience goes is that it's actually a skill that you need to work on all the time. It's something I like to look at it that it's actually a proactive skill, because unfortunately in business and a lot of the corporate sort of stuff I've done, it's really become synonymous with coping, and I just think that really sells it short, because I feel that resilience is about how you actually, grow through challenges. Awesome. Rather than just going through them. And I think it's a growth and a learning strategy and a skill. So I think from the outset, I think if anyone is wanting to, venture into this world of entrepreneurship, then this is absolutely essential skill set. If they don't have it, then their likelihood of succeeding is very, very low. So as far as practices to start with, the main one I recommend is gratitude. Awesome. And we hear this a lot about find how many things that you're grateful for, and I've sort of found that approach can feel a little bit wanky at times, and people just sort of kind of just go, oh, yeah, I'll do it because I've been told to do it. There's two things I do from a gratitude perspective. One is the use of mantras. So I've written a series of mantras, and the main one that I use is thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time.
Awesome.
And that one is a great go-to when you do feel overwhelmed or, that really struggling, is just to stop and say that, because it just grounds you in the moment. Because if you are in the moment entirely, you can't feel anxious and you can't feel depressed. You can just be, you're really present. So that's the starting point. And I use that mantra morning and night. So it's the first thing I say to myself when I wake up in the morning, even before my eyes open. And it's the last thing I say before I go to sleep of a night. So as my eyes are closed, about to fall asleep, I say that. So I find that mantras are easier because we're starting to program is good. The other way that I have done is a version of what are you grateful for? And the way that I've done it and I recommend is through a process of journaling. And it's just to answer at the end of every day, what was the best thing that happened today?
Awesome.
Yeah, and I frame that with starting a sentence that says, today I had the opportunity to. And I think even just framing things that way, it's like we're looking for opportunities, we're looking for the bright spots, we get what we look for. So if we start to program ourselves to look for the good, we're going to see more of the good. And when the negative comes up, then it's not going to impact us as greatly.
Yeah, no, that's really good. It sounds so simple, right? There's simple practices that people might be listening and thinking, well, that sounds relatively simple, but actually doing them is transformative, isn't it? The power of self-talk,
Yes.
like you say, saying those things and declaring those things is something super powerful about that. And, I loved what you're talking about in terms of resilience, that it's not just this thing to cope, but it's this thing to overcome. And, it sounds a bit twee, but as everyone says, it's not just about surviving, but it's about thriving. And I love that that's how you've taken, what's happened in your life. And you said, look, I'm not just going to make it to the end. I'm going to do something with this time I have. And like I say, super, super inspiring and, super helpful thoughts for people as well.
Yeah, thank you. And definitely with it, simplicity, because we have a tendency to overcomplicate things. So we'll hear things and we'll go, oh yeah, I've heard that before. I know that. That didn't work. And it's like, yeah, because you might have done it once or twice. But, for me, I've been doing the gratitude stuff, like the gratitude mantras for years, and the journaling. I haven't missed an evening of writing a journal before I go to bed in over 5 years now.
Wow.
So it is the discipline and the consistency, and it is, and that's where you actually then get the leverage out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like there was a moment or something that happened that was like a catalyst that caused this change? Obviously, you talked about the big challenges you faced in your teenage years, which I think are, so normal. I think, as if any of us think about anything like that happening to us, I feel like that would just be so, it would be such a challenge in those years, those formative years. But then you talked about coming through the other side of that and things changing. Was it a shift of mindset? Was it something that happened to you? What was it that began that change for you?
Oh, look, it was both a gradual thing and some of those sort of pivotal things.
Sure.
So I'd gotten to the point where I was feeling really, really foggy, and I just sort of thought, look, this is just ridiculous. I can't keep going like this. But also I found myself, at a rock bottom moment where I really didn't want to be here at all. And that scared me, that I found myself in that space, because there's so much judgment and assumptions around how can anything be so bad that the alternative seems like a better option. And we look at that when we hear about other people, taking their lives or attempting to, and things like that. So finding myself in that situation, that was a huge kick up the arse. And the fact that I was even thinking that way, I thought, no, look, and that sort of led to the proverbial fork in the road, where it's like, do you get on with it or do you give up? And that's why I'm like, well, I'm getting on with it. And just didn't do it. Like, I wasn't going, I didn't just flip this switch and go, I'm going to go and change the world, or I'm going to do all these, amazing things. It was more about, I'm actually just going to get on with life, and I'm going to do exactly what everyone else around me is doing. And that was, to finish school, to get a job, to have relationships, to do that sort of stuff. And that's where it really started to to open up my world to possibilities beyond, I guess, taking the everyday path.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you find people are, how have people been on this journey, in terms of getting through those teenage years and coming to where you are now? Has there been any experiences where it's been super helpful or, the opposite, very, challenging? How have people been in the, dealing with this?
Oh, look, I kept all this to myself. So I was really, really stubborn. So, most of the people, quite close to me I guess they knew that I was struggling, but I was never going to let anyone in, and I didn't. And it was actually even really interesting. I got a message the other day from an old high school friend on Facebook that says, "You were such an angry stoner when we were at school, and it's just so great to see how far you've come." So it's funny because sometimes you think people didn't really notice, but clearly people did. But I found I got involved in music was a huge thing for me. So I was involved in, I got involved in some youth groups, and through those youth groups, I was always like, "We're going to go to a concert. We're going to go to a concert. We're going to go to a concert." And so that really, I feel that probably saved me.
Awesome.
Through that time, I just immersed in music. I went and got involved in live music, and I found that at the time, music probably gave me a way to express myself that I didn't have the words to do.
Sure.
And it's been my constant companion, and, I love it more than ever now.
Yeah, I love that. That's so good. So good. A lot of our listeners would be entrepreneurs, starting businesses, and it's something that we've talked about in in our community frequently before, about how, an entrepreneur is really defined by this ability to overcome challenges. And so, as I said before, different people's challenges are going to be very different. The context will all look very different. But you've obviously gone through a lot of this, and you've even written a book about this, right? In terms of your thought process and how people can overcome this kind of stuff and be resilient, right? So could you talk to us a little bit about the book, about what's inside it, and just some principles from it, again, adding to what you've already told us about how people can continue to be resilient?
Absolutely. So the book came about just reverse engineering how I got from the lowest to the lows to where I was at that moment in time when I wrote the book, which I started writing the book about 6 years ago now. Typical entrepreneur, I actually crowdfunded the book before I even wrote it.
Awesome.
And I've always been told, sell it first, make it later, make sure that people put their money to it. So I did exactly that.
Good.
And that was an interesting challenge in itself. But so the book itself, it's a how-to, and it's just broken down into the key principles that I realised that worked for me. So it's such an easy read. I liken it to, we go to the gym to build and maintain physical strength. The book is your resilience gym. Great. So it gives you all these really practical exercises and reflecting tools to work on. So there's 9 core principles there, and in between the time that I crowdfunded and I actually finished the book, I'd been out speaking a lot, and then I discovered a couple of other pieces, so I put a couple of bonus principles in there too. The core ones that I feel that are probably most important from an entrepreneur perspective is responsibility. Right. As an entrepreneur, as entrepreneurs, we have to take complete responsibility for our experiences and what we do with our time and why we're doing what we're doing. And as you said, being an entrepreneur is all about solving problems, and a lot of the time it's about solving problems that don't even exist yet. Right. So it's being, really taking ownership for everything, not blaming others, blaming the system, blaming, that something didn't work on anyone else. We have to always look at ourselves and go, I'll take ownership for this. And a lot of the times it's taking ownership for what you do next, because often things happen that are out of our control. Can't change what's already happened. All we can do is change how we feel about what happened and what we do next. Yeah. So I think that's the foundational piece. It's not always easy, but it's really the foundation. The other that I find super important, and what you're doing with the podcast is helpful. It's really helpful for this as well. Is having a good support network, and it doesn't have to be in person. It can be virtual. It could be through books. It's making sure that you surround yourself with high quality people, you spend high quality time with them, and you be very, very conscious of the information, the food, the energy, everything that you consume is making sure that it actually fuels you and lights you up, and making sure to get rid of toxic people, toxic energy, toxic information. So don't watch the news, that type of thing. So, that they're super, super important. And these days, it's never been easier to create a good support network, even if you don't have people physically around you. It's just amazing. And the third one I feel that's super valuable as well is just the language we use.
Right.
Because we have a tendency to overly dramatize negative situations, and we often don't really put enough energy into the positive sides. We don't celebrate successes, but we'll beat ourselves up and really, as I say, catastrophize, dramatize, awfulize, all those things. So it's making sure that you actually be very conscious of the words that you use and the impact they have, because the reality is how you describe something is how you're going to experience it.
Wow.
So little subtle word shifts can change the complete experience. Even little things like, it could be saying, sometimes we go, oh, we have to do something. There's an energy around that that's heavy, and it feels like we're obliged.
Right.
But if we shift that to, we get to do this.
Come on.
Like, how exciting is it that we actually get to do this?
Yeah,
so little word switches, and journaling's really helpful for starting to become more aware of the words we use as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what kind of rings through everything you're saying as well. Right at the start of the interview, you talked about how even with the time, whether you go forward or back, you're saying, I want to stay in the present because we're creating the future. And I love that, because as entrepreneurs, one of the, at least from my experience, one of the most frustrating things I face is that, disappointment or discouragement that I'm not where I feel like I should be, or we haven't got this project to where it should be, or that hasn't advanced as much as I would like. And it's like, Ben, for crying out loud, live in the present a little bit more. And, everything you're talking about in terms of the words we use and journaling to get some perspective. I think as entrepreneurs, we just try and rush out the gates and get a business running and forget that, we're the most important part of the business, the way we think, the way we are. And, so I think this is so on point for so many people, and super, super helpful.
Yeah, and definitely. And as an entrepreneur, as you said, with the visionary, the founder, the person that's driving the vision is the most important. And it's also remembering that a business is never going to outgrow its leader.
Totally.
So it's totally making sure that you take that ownership. You are setting the scene and making sure that you are totally aware of the impact that your behavior, energy, and language has on the people around you as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's awesome. No, so good, so good. It's been, super helpful what you've shared with us today, Stacey. If you could give our listeners, one thing. I know you shared a whole bunch of value bombs, so but if you could give them one thing in terms of going away today, so I'm going to, really act on one thing, instill one thing in my life to make sure I become a more resilient person and see the results of that down the line, what would you say that would be?
Look, absolutely, it's gratitude. It changes everything, and especially in gratitude is proactive, and it's also situational.
Right.
So so using the mantra is proactive gratitude. So we're conditioning ourselves to be grateful for everything around us, and also just be grateful for who we are. And that's why I just come up with that one line, which I can share with you to pop in the notes.
Yeah.
And it just helps you to sort of be just so grateful for the opportunity to actually be in a position to create and do those things. And also situational gratitude. So just little things. So it could just be when you're cleaning your teeth in the morning, just thinking about the little things, like, I'm grateful I've got running water to do this. I'm grateful I've got a light and I've got a heater in my bathroom for those cold mornings, and I've actually got toothpaste, and I've got all these things. Or it could be, in the shower. I quite often just see, how good does it feel to just have hot running water over you first thing in the morning? And when we condition ourselves to be grateful in all of those aspects, when something does go wrong, straight up, we can actually go, thank you for this opportunity, even though we don't feel grateful about it. But we can't feel bad about something we're grateful for. So gratitude in all of those different scenarios I feel it's really the superpower of resilience.
Yeah, it's so good. It reminds me, I once heard someone say that gratitude begins when entitlement ends. And I feel like your story is so applicable to that and powerful from that perspective, because I think, as the human race, we feel like we're entitled to have, a body that moves in the way that everyone else's does. And, obviously you've been restricted in that because of a tragic accident, but you're not sitting there thinking, well, I should be entitled to these things. It's actually, no, I'm grateful for what I do have. And for me, that's so powerful.
Oh, look, completely. And one of my core values that I have up is around gratitude, and the statement that I have around that is I've been entitled to nothing, grateful for everything.
So good.
And that's how I live my life. And I feel that entitlement really is the mortal enemy of any success. It's a mortal enemy of resilience, of gratitude, all of those things. And I feel that if we were to look at people who are embarking on entrepreneurship, that's the one thing they need to check at the door, is to get rid of that, because that's going to sabotage them so much.
So true. And it's such I was going to say pandemic, but that's probably not a timely word to use. But in our generation, like a bad thing that our generation really does carry is that idea of entitlement, that I'm entitled to this, and really no, it's you got to go out there, be grateful for what you do have, and then earn everything else.
Yeah, for sure.
So powerful. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Stacey. If people do want to hear more about you, or if they want to grab the book, tell us where they can go to grab that.
Yeah, the best place to go is to howtoberesilient.com.au for the Aussiness in me. And there you'll be able to get a free download of How to Be Resilient. And it's said Resilience Gem, a very easy read. It's something you can go back to, but will give you the very, very simple ways to implement these proactive strategies into your life, so that you're actually set up so that when things do go wrong, and they will go wrong, and that's part of entrepreneurship. Nice. As we try new things, shit's going to go wrong.
Yeah,
that's just how it is. Sure. So, and the better you can deal with it, the better you're going to get along. So that'll be good. And then from there, you'll get my contact details, and feel free to hit me up and ask me any questions at all. So I love the conversations that come from sharing stories and being able to hear other people's journeys as well.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, so that's awesome. Well, I'd encourage everyone listening to make sure they do go and grab that resource, connect with you, be inspired by that. And we'll make sure all of that is linked up in the show notes as well. So, so people can do that. We really appreciate you coming on today, Stacey. It's been super, super inspiring. And I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of this, and they're going to be a lot more resilient in the future, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for creating this space to be able to share these messages with entrepreneurs to help them succeed along their journey too.
Oh, it's my honor, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Hey, well, thanks so much for being with us on the Impact Unlimited podcast today. If the content has helped you in any way, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. Tag us on the socials if anything has inspired you from this episode. And listen, if you've got 2 minutes to spare, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review on your chosen podcast platform. Honestly, we'd be forever grateful. And to show that, when you do, be sure to enter our monthly appreciation prize draw, where we give away Amazon vouchers to our podcast community. Simply head to impactunlimited.com/podcast. That's impactunlimited.com/podcast in order to find out all the information, as well as explore more free training content. Listen, it's been a pleasure. And remember, don't just make an income, make an impact. All right, we'll see you next week.